Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you're able to pick this recording for In Conversation With. My name is Dave Sleet. I'm co-founder of A&A Psychological Accreditation, and I'm absolutely delighted. After 2 years of trying, we are joined by APA member Amanda Budden. Now, Amanda works with children and young people, and it's a specialization that has brought about some amazing experience. So I really hope that people that are watching are going to be able to gain some huge insights from Amanda's experience, her understandings and her knowledge. But you can't get a CPD recognition for this recording from APA unless you fill out a questionnaire that's attached in the comments. So before we get started, go get yourself that questionnaire. Make sure you can verbalize what it is that you gain and get the CPD at the end of this video. So without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Amanda. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for that. Right, well, 2 years, yes. Brave enough to do it eventually.
Hey, there's no have to. It's always about the invitation, and yeah, it's been 2 years, but I've seen your growth in those 2 years. I've got to understand an awful lot more about you, but the audience out there may not. So why not hand this over to you, give you the mic, and let you give an introduction and a bit more information about you and what it is that you do.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Well, there are 3 of us actually in ABC Children and Young People's Therapy. We're based in Highbridge in Somerset. We're 3 psychotherapists, all of us with our own experiences of neurodiversion. My colleague Leah, she has 3 autistic children, as does my colleague Ellie. I have an autistic son with ADHD. So that kind of led us to our area of specialism. We do work with all neurotypes of children from the ages of 4 up to the age of 25. But most of our clients tend to be neurodivergent. And we've been doing that really for the last 4 years, and it's kind of grown. My colleague Ellie does less of the psychotherapy. She's more focused on the educational side of it. So if a child is having difficulties in school and needs an educational healthcare plan, Ellie would be responsible for helping support and implement that. Leah and myself do the psychotherapy. Leah specializes in sort of the crafts and sort of the more hands-on type of therapy. I'm a gaming therapist primarily, which works very well with an awful lot of neurodivergent children.
And the absolute explosion in the last 10 years of understanding around neurodivergence and the various kind of, I don't want to say spectrum identity, but we have come to understand that just because someone has a particular neurodivergence does not mean they experience that divergence in exactly the same way, does it?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, when I started on this journey, I found a lot of professionals very dismissive of neurodivergence. It wasn't something that you couldn't offer therapy to a person with ADHD. You couldn't offer therapy to a person with autism. I found the kind of profession's attitude towards it quite negative. And I think I've said to you before, I question everything. You know, that is my nature. I have ADHD myself. I'm very tenacious. This is my hyper focus. So I was quite annoyed about this because I just thought, well, anxiety is anxiety and people are people. If we're taking trauma, anxiety as as a specific kind of difficulty.
Mm.
So whatever your neurotype, you can still respond to therapy. There's no
And it's
reason why you
about
can't.
connection, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
the entire pathway, the delivery mechanism to really good therapeutic experience is the funnel of connection with a qualified professional.
Absolutely.
Where that funnel comes out to with a client, they have to be there for that funnel.
Yeah.
And you can't make somebody be where that funnel is. That funnel has to go to them. And that professional drift, and I think this is something that you've demonstrated in ways that most people would find difficult to understand without getting to know you. That professional drift to be where the client is phenomenal. And I think it's remarkable. I absolutely love what you and your team do. But you've had to fight for that, haven't you?
Yeah, I think it's I mean the way I qualified is an unconventional route. I mean, 6 years ago when I trained, there was definite steering away from working with younger children if you were a counsellor, for example. The traditional way of qualifying is you'd have a master's degree or some sort of postgraduate degree. That was the only way you could work with children. I was told that by one of my university tutors. And it really bugged me because I thought a lot of the teens and tweens I've been working with, their difficulties occurred much, much earlier on in preschool, infant school, and there was no support for them. So, and I've completely drifted off and forgotten your question because of my ADHD.
And this is the beauty. I love the conversations that we have for that very reason.
Yeah.
But having to fight for your place.
Yeah.
That's something that clients are experiencing on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you just said, I think we talked earlier before we set up about phrases or words of advice that stick in your head. And one of the biggest and most important for me was my tutor saying there's nothing more important than the connection and therapeutic relationship with your client. That is what facilitates healing. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter what other interventions you can offer. If you don't have that connection, that therapeutic relationship, it's pointless if they can't engage with you.
Yeah, and it's in the conversation for those that are curious about the conversation previous to recording, we were talking about how a professional, a mentor, can make a comment that without really understanding the depth and the potential kind of strength of that comment. And for professionals who are engaged with a client who is mutually engaged, quite often those comments become bedrock and they stick with us for a very long time. And when someone has a neurodivergence, those comments can become life affirming, can't they?
Yeah. Yes, I think it's always kept things in perspective for me. I always found it interesting when you've got new therapists, they're just starting out and they're all very concerned about whether they can follow the framework they've been taught, whether they can implement the interventions they've been taught. And then when you just say to them, actually, hang on, all that will come into play, yes, but the connection at the start is the most important thing.
Yeah. I can remember one of my first mentors when I started out professionally who said you can have all of the best tools in your toolbox, but if you don't remember to take the toolbox to the job, you're not going to get the job done. And it's that connection of knowing all of the tools that you have available, knowing how to use them, but also knowing when to use them. And when someone has a neurodivergence, you might have to take every tool out of the toolbox to find that one piece of connection that's going to build everything else for you. And the work that you and the team do with children and young people, I think has set a benchmark for what, or a template, should I say, for what can be done if the connection's in place.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm also, with the type of work I do, if I'm working with much younger children, I've also got to work with the parents. So I think that side of it also, I mean, I'm trained in aware parenting. I train with Aletha Salter, and her strategies of gentle parenting are really appropriate for neurodivergence. Working, parenting neurodivergent children. I use them myself with my own child, and there are some adaptations along the way, but this is when it comes down to, actually it is more difficult to work with younger children, but it's not impossible without a master's degree. And so
a master's degree is ultimately effective at building knowledge of what's gone before and giving opportunities to engage with more ideas, a wider spectrum of ideas than you might otherwise have. And I don't want to discredit or kind of pull that apart in any way, shape or form, but you can sit in a classroom for your entire life. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to make the connection with the one person that it needs that connection, and that's the person that's right in front of you. And that flexibility to be able to drift to where they need you to be as a professional is a skill set that no textbook is ever going to give.
And to be fair, Dave, they have changed things since I trained. I mean, now you can, I mean, part of the HND now does include working with children and young people, which it didn't when I took my when I graduated. I was fortunate because I worked, well, my internship was with the local college, and they actually sent me on a separate training course for children so that I could ethically work with children and young people.
And working with children and young people, in my mind, is a specialization in itself. They are trainee humans. They're still finding their feet. They're finding their way. They're also trying to, they're in so many ways, they are more connected to themselves than most adults. They don't have, in generalization, the capacity to communicate that connection that they have with themselves and the frustrations that come with that in a world that still doesn't learn how to speak child.
And that's a good point, actually, because I mean, the other thing that I've found, again, when I first started in practice, was when I was working at the college, and actually when I went on to work for a children's charity afterwards, there were so many opportunities where the parents could have actually helped. And of course, the framework that I was originally taught, you don't, it's only the child you work with, you don't work with the parents, which is why I then looked into the possibilities of including the parents in the process. I went on to train in child-parent relationship therapy, which as a model is in some areas is a little outdated, but again, you can always adapt these things to suit the clients that you're working with. One of the interesting things that came up, if you include the parents in the process, therapy can be has been researched to be 20% more effective than if you don't have parents involved in the process.
And that, for me, we've, over the last 20 years or so, we've seen more and more silo working. We've seen more and more modality isolation. But the clients don't live in those silos. They don't live, breathe in isolation to their home, their family, their friends, their community. And when we try and provide a siloed approach to the therapeutic experience, we're almost asking that client, who is still trying to find their feet in that big wide world, to almost work psychologically in a vacuum that's only them.
Yeah. And
that to me has always seemed, and I've been through, therapeutic experience way back when, as a child, as a young adult, and ongoing through my life. But when we try and include the understanding of what that child's experiencing outside of the therapeutic arena, all of a sudden more things happen that allow us to make progress. And that, I think, is something that we have to break those silos down, and we have to be kind of going, let's look at the whole environment, and allow a child or a young person to express what they're experiencing in the entirety. And I know there are professionals out there that do that without the fanfare and everything else. I do think sometimes we have to kind of break down some of the barriers and go, no, we need the parents to be working with the therapeutic process.
Yeah, I mean, there are occasions, especially with sort of teenagers, they don't want parents involved at all. But I'm very, I try to keep my therapeutic process adaptable. So, I've had children and young people that bring animals in, for example, because it makes them feel more comfortable. They can bring mum, dad in, either or both. I've had young clients bring friends in for that first session, because unless you actually get the client in a position where they feel comfortable and relaxed with you, you cannot start the process.
Yeah, so you're always starting from behind a curve that you can't even get onto.
No, and it's I don't. Again, it's one of those things I question all the time. It's the kind of, this is how we do it. We get the client in the room, and particularly with young children, not allowing the parent in. It's such a frightening process for them. They don't know what's going to happen, and I don't understand it. So again, that's really has facilitated my journey into adapting my therapy so that it does suit the child. It does help the engagement.
And that's flexibility. That is professional flexibility to meet the client where the client is, and what the client needs, rather than what a textbook says. And I think, if the textbooks were all right, then the clients would be going to the library.
Well, yes, but so it's the old thing that we're all different, so it's not. So why should therapy be one static framework and expect it to work for everybody? Which brings you back to neurodivergence, doesn't it?
Exactly. And I think, when we look at neurodivergence, and as you've said, that's a personal experience for you as well. Do you think I'm going to put a chain together here, okay? So not only having neurodivergence, but accepting and embracing that neurodivergence has enhanced your capacity as a professional?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because I mean, even just if I just isolate the parenting side of it, you know, my son, if I was using a traditional punishment reward system with him, he would have mental health difficulties. I have no doubt about that. You know, it doesn't work for his particular neurotype. So, and then, you know, actually in the therapy room in itself, because of my experiences, I'm able to share them, and help the client make sense of what's happening to them, especially if it's a new diagnosis. You know, they've I mean, children know that they're different if they're neurodivergent. You know, they know that they're not like their neurotypical friends, really, from a very early age. And that can be quite distressing for them. So once they understand why they're different, that's the first breakthrough. Then it's a matter of helping them come to terms with it and helping them understand it and helping them realize, and the parents, of course, it's not a negative thing. It's just a difference.
Yeah, and it's that, you know, APA's kind of identified there's the awareness phase, there's the resilience phase, and then there's the empowerment phase.
Yeah.
And when you have a professional that can walk that journey with a client, and that client embrace each of those phases, you have a partnership in practice that is almost unbreakable. And the outcomes for those clients, but also the growth for that professional, is really, really profound.
I agree. I think I'm extremely privileged, but this isn't kind of, there was no contrived, this is what I've set out to do. It's very much been a growth process for myself and for my team. You know, we've come across hurdles, we've come across difficulties, and it's easier.
And when
what we do more accessible.
Yeah. When you kind of think back to your journey professionally and building ABC and the partnerships with your colleagues, what do you think are the kind of big kind of standout moments for you?
It's interesting, really, because it would always come back to clients. You know, it would come back to clients who had real difficulties. For example, I can talk about a client. I'm putting some case studies together at some stage, because some of them have such a profound impact on me, and I think it would be good for other people to learn how these things work and how there is possibilities to work people. Selective mutism is a typical one. In 1 year, I worked with 3 children, and we call it situational mutism. I know it's known as selective mutism, but it's not a choice. It is extreme level of anxiety affecting the vocal cords. So, you know, these children stand out for me, because when you start off with a child who is struggling to communicate and is obviously struggling with such huge levels of anxiety, and they've been let down by everyone around them. I'm not talking parents, I mean professionals around them. And then you start to work with them and you see them start to blossom towards the end of therapy. You know, these are children that couldn't attend school. These are children that couldn't leave the house. Their friendship group had dwindled to nothing because they couldn't talk to them. And to see at the end of that process, all that's changed, you know, that you can't shut them up then. Stop talking, you know, not that you want to. It's just that kind of journey. That's the kind of milestones that stand out for me. It's always about the client.
Yeah, and this is what I really wanted to kind of get across in the conversation, is whenever someone's going through that build of a private practice, and the hurdles can seem massive. I've always used a phrase professionally: keep the goal larger than the hurdle. And if the goal is larger than the hurdle, then you'll always see over the hurdle, right? If the goal becomes really small in the distance, and the hurdle will always appear massive and you can never get over it. But if the goal is the client blossoms, the client connects to themselves in a way that allows them to grow and evolve, and that's the track we're on, then all of that hard work doesn't even become a memory, does it?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've had, as you know, I've had lots of battles. Sometimes it's with, well, I'm not going to be specific because that would be unprofessional, but with other professionals, I've had an awful lot of battles to just try and dispel myths and misunderstandings around neurodivergence. Dismissive comments about, as I said before, about them not being suitable candidates for therapy, because I think one of the phrases I've heard is, well, autistic people are going to be anxious. That's part of the course and tough, really. This was from a professional, and and I know different, and it's having to then say, well, no, actually, you're wrong. I can prove that to you. And now I've got 4,000 client hours under my belt. I don't advertise. All my clients come through referrals from word of mouth. I've had a couple from social services as well, but generally it's private clients from word of mouth. So the evidence is there, really, that you can work with neurodivergent clients successfully.
And again, it's creating the conditions for growth.
Yeah.
And whatever modality and client focus a professional has, their success comes from creating the conditions for growth. And if an engineer was to say, well, I'm an engineer, but I only deal with steam trains, they're never going to get a job on a locomotive. But they're an engineer. As psychological professionals, we can specialize in those steam trains, and that can be our focus. But that does not mean for 1 second that is the only capacity that we have.
No, it can't be, really, because every time you meet someone, they'll have a different difficulty to the last person. So if you're not prepared to increase your learning, and I think there's quite a common, again, going back to Facebook groups, one of the common themes I see is, oh, you're not qualified to do that, you should refer out. And the thing is, especially in what I do, you can't refer out. There is no one else. You've got to get yourself qualified. You've got to get yourself competent. You've got to do the learning. Otherwise, you can't support the client properly.
And it's that kind of confidence to learn and grow as a professional that I think sets aside an awful lot of the professional experience that the public report. Not me saying that. It's the public's perception of the sector. And that's makes a massive difference when a professional is prepared to drift and create the conditions for them to be able to help. Whether you use that tool, that qualification and that knowledge all the time, or whether you use it when you need to, having it is better than not.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I learned really early on is I needed to study developmental psychology, which I did, and that helped. That's when I started to kind of identify more of the traits that were perhaps not, I don't like the word normal, but not neurotypical. And then you start to find other things. I discovered that actually schools were not set up to assess, understand, or support these children in a lot of cases.
It's a Victorian system.
Yeah, but the unfortunate thing, I mean, I was old coming to motherhood. You know, even though we've got grown-up stepchildren, this was my own first child. I was 46, and I was like a lot of new mums, under the impression that you send them to school, and if there's any difficulties, the teaching staff will pick it up, but they're not trained. They're not trained at all. So this is, and I find that a lot of parents find this similar. So teaching yourself, understanding what's neurotypical, what's not neurotypical, and then I've gone on and I've taken the ADOS 2 training so I can understand what a psychologist would be looking for, although it's a team of 3 for an autism diagnosis. But at least if I understand the process, I can confidently write from the report with my observations and help that child get the support they need. I can confidently go back to the school and say, well, I've assessed this child for ADHD. I use the latest computer software that is actually recommended by NICE, and this child needs to be referred for needs to be referred to the neurodevelopmental team for an ADHD assessment. I can confidently say that now, and most of the time, schools will be on board and they'll put that forward most of the time now. But as you said, the fight to get there.
And these are all building blocks towards positive mental health and the conditions for those to exist for those clients. The ripple impact when those building blocks are in place and the systemic benefits are fundamentally massive. But the fear of walking on those building blocks for a lot of the system as it is currently is just as massive, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I have had kind of the old doubts creep in every now and then, but there's kind of deep within my core, I know I'm right. And that sounds terribly ignorant, not conceited, sorry, but I guess that's my neurodivergence talking, really. But I do, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that I'm going in the right direction. The courses I've done, I meet fellow professionals, and I see as I said to you before, I see the misconceptions about neurodivergence. And I want to kind of stand up and say, look, I'm neurodivergent, you're wrong. This is, you can help,
I think what you've created and the journey that you've taken to get ABC to where it is phenomenal. And I've said that to you before, and I'm saying it publicly. And I think the engagement and the connection that you and the team are able to put into play very, very quickly. And I think that's also a key point to pick up, is the speed at which a family can get that engagement and have that your knowledge, understanding and experience brought to bear on their behalf, so that collectively they are able to support their child, their young adult.
And I include the school as well, but anyone, I've actually gone to families where the whole family, grandparents, uncles have been there, and actually given a psychoeducation on the best way to help support that particular child. So
and again, that's, I mean, Carl will be jumping up and down and waving banners and everywhere and go, they get it, it's the conditions for growth. finally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only taken 60, 70 years, but it's that understanding that it can't just be injected into the child's mind.
No, I mean, yes, that's something I learned really early on was I'm not in the business of fix my child. You know, it's got to be a collaborative.
Yeah.
The child is not the problem, you know.
Yeah.
It's never the child's fault. Yeah,
and
it's the whole.
And it's that flexibility, adaptability, and I absolutely, as I'm pretty sure I must be gushing. I think any work that allows the environment to grow and evolve, that allows the flexibility of the individual to establish itself and to grow as an individual is what this is all about. And it doesn't matter what a child's perceived engagement level might be. For them, it's their lived engagement, and that's the connection point, not the perceived they should be doing X, Y, or Z because we've said that's what they should be doing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I sometimes find quite difficult is if I feel pressured to get results quickly, and then I start doing sort of mindfulness, which is a good thing in itself, but it might not be what the child needs right at that moment, or the young person needs right at that moment. They might just actually need me to sit there and play Minecraft with them in silence for an hour. That might be the safe space that they need for healing. That's the only thing I do find if you're working with a whole family or other professionals. It's the kind of results driven side of it, really.
And I'm going back to those throwaway comments or everything else. When I was learning that a lifetime is a lifetime, you might want the result in 6 weeks, but the result you get has to be a benefit that lasts the rest of that lifetime, or it's not a result.
Absolutely. And I mean, to say with the parenting work I do, this is one of the things that I think is really important, empowering parents so they can support their child, but they're also learning skills that they'll be able to use in the future. So in theory, therapy should be needed less over the long term because they'll have the right skills to support their child.
And again, creating the environment and the conditions for positive growth. And it's remarkable. Now, before we wrap this up, because as always when I speak to you, the time flies by. You've already kind of alluded to the challenges of acceptance around the work you do and the focus that you have. We've been kind of talking the last couple of years about getting this conversation in front of a wider audience than just you and I. But the support that you have in that process of the work that you do, how do you feel the sector has kind of managed that support and that understanding for you?
I don't think it's managed it at all, really. I mean, that's why I joined APA in the first place, was because everything I was reading, I was thinking, no one's going to get me. No one's going to understand what I'm doing. I was really wholeheartedly discouraged from even trying when I was at university. And I just think that's not client-centered, for one. It's not valuing me and my ability to work with the therapeutic process and build a therapeutic relationship. It's so much of it is just missing the point. Yeah, so no, I don't. I mean, I have Facebook groups where people seem to all get it and support each other, but I'm very careful what I say, because you quickly get jumped on. Well, you know, you should have gone to this place, you should have done this course, you should have done this. Well, you know, I've done over 13 different trainings. I'm perfectly competent. Thank you very much. Just because it's not what you've done, but then you're not working with the clients I'm working with. So
yeah,
you know.
So you're pre-connection to APA. So you're in an environment where, for no fault of anybody's targeted environment, right? Let's be clear. No one is targeted to create that perception. It's simply the way things have evolved within the environment. You're feeling disconnected, those kind of not valued for you, your experience, your understanding, etc. And then you come across APA. What was that like? Well,
I think the thing about APA is their ethical values align with mine. The client is at the center. Yeah. And for the client to be at the center, you have to support your therapist. They have to feel valued for who they are, the experience, then training that they have. But that also with APA, it's on a very individual level. You know, and you're not saying you've got to be qualified with us. We're going to offer you courses that you've got to do, and we're going to charge you loads of money to do them. Otherwise, you're not going to get your accreditation, because that's just wrong. And that's not client. It's not for the benefit of the client. It's certainly not for the benefit of the therapist. You know, anyone can sit down for hours, do research, and write a paper based on putting out what they think you want to hear. But to actually evaluate a therapist and their efficacy as a person, you have to actually meet them, really. You know, get, you know, I think anyway, this
and you've been through the membership process, and that conversation of discovery is that let's have a conversation now. That process is almost alien in the UK mental health established pathway to accreditation and membership. How did you feel going through that process?
Well, it was interesting because when I first started looking for my placement, I went for a few interviews, and I found anyone that was trained integratively had trained at this one particular college, and it was fantastic. But it wasn't a BACP accredited course, it was an AIM course. So I wasn't going to say BACP, would I? I've said it again now.
It's fine. I think most people understand that the largest charity in the sector is the BACP.
But it was interesting because when I was going around for the interviews, there was one of the first people that interviewed me. The first thing she said to me was, "I'm not interested in your qualifications. I'm just interested in you." And I went through a few interviews. So I walked all of them. You know, everyone wanted. And then I had an interview with a college, and it completely took my breath away. It was completely different. It was all with BACP, and you've got to, you know, what do you want for your career prospects? How do you see your future career developing? And it was completely taken away from who I was. You know, it wasn't about, can you build a relationship? Can you relate to our clients? And that really took me aback, because that wasn't what I'd experienced. So, yeah, and when I actually came to take people on to join me in my practice, that was the first thing I said. So, you know, I'm not interested in qualifications. Come and meet. Actually, my son interviewed interviewed Leah for me.
And what better point of contact for
Absolutely.
live feedback are you going to get than someone
Kelly
that is living and breathing that?
Yeah.
But so APA's kind of conversation of discoveries is very much that process, isn't it? It's that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and we've got the verbal application pathway to kind of reduce as much of the paperwork side as possible, and have that through conversation, and that's all supports the neurodiverse engagement as much as physically possible. But when you looked at that, you decided a different path, didn't you? It was there. The option was to have completely verbal, but just knowing it was there was enough to support you.
Yeah, I think it was very refreshing. I mean, I think because I'm kind of late diagnosed, also, I'm used to having to do things the hard way. So, yeah, I pushed on. But yes, you're absolutely right. Just knowing that I could have just completed the application verbally was refreshing and accommodating.
What, you know, you're in practice. You are doing the job day to day. And I think a lot of people kind of go, but what does a membership body actually mean when there's not a governing body? So I don't have to have anything to do with a membership body if I don't want to, but I choose to. For you, what's it like having APA in your corner?
Well, there's lots of factors to that. I mean, there's the public. I think from a public perspective, it's important to show that you are a member of an organisation that supports the way you work, really, which I know APA do. I also know that if I have any difficulties, I can work through it. You know, you'll support me because you understand what I do. So yeah, and it's also yeah, I think it's all sorts of reasons really, and not feeling, especially in private practice, can be quite lonely. I mean, I'm talking really about other people as well, because for myself, there's three of us, but for someone who's in private practice on their own, having that support from an organisation that really gets them and really understands, especially if they were trained in a way that they put the therapeutic relationship first, and they want an organisation that reflects those values. Yeah.
And thank you for that, because it is something that both Siobhan and I kind of put right at the centre of everything that APA was, you know, before it was born. You know, and if you're going to put a test tube baby together, that's, you know, that's where the APA test tube started, was right at the very heart, making sure that the work that the professionals do and the way they work, person-centered with their client and led by their client, has to be the way APA delivers that support to the professional. So it really does become a three-way relationship.
It is. But I think it's a difficult ask really for any kind of, or difficult thing to achieve, because you're in competition with powers who are in there for the money.
I mean,
they're businesses. They're not. I guess you're a business, but you can have an ethical business, can't you?
Yeah, and this is where I think APA does stand out, and I think it's for professionals to create the atmosphere. You know, and we can create. Yeah, so I used this analogy when I was working in the hospitality sector many moons ago. Okay, we can create the restaurant. We can get the best chefs. We can get the best furniture. We can get the best lighting fittings and the best soundtrack and the sound system and everything else. but it's the people that come into the restaurant that create the atmosphere. And if we open the doors and just go, we'll take absolutely everybody, and then we're not going to have the atmosphere that you would have with your clients.
Yes,
and that
and actually,
relationship isn't going to be in.
that's a really good point, actually, because when I was looking at university courses, I was quite horrified at the kind of bums and seats mentality that appeared to be present in some of the courses. It was less, and I'd come from a very nurturing, very supportive, very ethical course, say at the local college, and I was quite shocked at the difference that other providers were offering.
Yeah, the education factory.
No, that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
And all the ethics that you're supposed to be teaching, they're irrelevant to you. They're only relevant for your students to learn. And it's like, well, what's that about?
Yeah. And that's a conversation we'll have another day.
No, I think we should. Yeah. I think Carl Rogers would turn in his grave if he heard some of the things that go on.
I don't think it's any secret. I think anybody that has watched any of the In Conversation With or has followed that up in any way, shape or form, most people understand that it's APA's position that you cannot claim to be ethical by coercing somebody onto your platform.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's even less ethical to claim to do that if because you have an ethical framework.
Yeah.
It's a bit like democracy down the barrel of a gun. It don't work.
No.
So
yeah.
Moving forward, what are your hopes for ABC and for the world of mental health?
Yeah, I mean, for ABC, it's all about sort of where we go next with trainings. Really, I mean, for myself, I'm looking more at sort of sensory integration and things like that, because that tends to sensory processing issues tend to be right across the kind of spectrum. So that would be quite useful. But really, it is just, what for the future? I don't know, really. I don't plan it. I haven't really planned it from the start, Dave. It's just taken me along with it, really.
You are what I can kind of pinpoint to something that my athletics coach told me years ago. You have become an amazingly good professional glider.
Right. Thank you. I shall remind myself of that when I wonder what I'm doing.
And being able to glide through whatever turbulence and whatever air pressure there is, you've been able to navigate your path through. And it's phenomenal to see. I'm absolutely delighted that you are an APA accredited member. And I want to say a massive thank you for your time. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I know.
Yeah, I've been pretty much nervous throughout, but hopefully that doesn't make too much of an impact on the conversation. Thank you.
I know that we've talked about doing more of these, and I really hope that you'll come on and take part in other episodes. But for now, a massive thank you. And to everybody out there, I want to say a massive thank you for your time. As I said right at the top, if you've gained from hearing Amanda's story and the conversation, then get yourself that validation questionnaire and get yourself the CPD certificate. Links will be attached to the video. So for now, take care, and we'll see you in another episode very, very soon. Bye-bye.